All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at a pretty big partnership
Hmm.
between the British Council and UNICEF
Yeah.
to totally revamp Egypt's secondary school English curriculum.
Oh,
And we're basing this deep dive mainly on this article from the PIE News. So why should you care? Well, Egypt's got this massive youth population, like seriously, 60% under 30.
yeah.
So this isn't just some textbook update.
Right.
We could be talking about empowering an entire generation globally.
Right.
So we'll be unpacking the size of Egypt's education system, what they're aiming for with this curriculum, and how it all ties into Egypt's overall, development plan.
It's pretty incredible we're talking about the biggest education system in the whole Middle East and North Africa.
Really?
Over 23 million students.
23 million. That's hard to even imagine.
Yeah,
It really shows you just how big of a deal this could be.
absolutely.
So at the heart of it, what's the partnership trying to do
Basically, it's all about boosting English proficiency
across the entire system?
across the whole system, not just like adding a few English classes. This is like a system-wide change.
Okay, so why is English so important in this context?
Well, in a world that's becoming more and more interconnected.
Right.
English is often seen as like this key that unlocks all these opportunities. And there's actually research to back this up. Studies have shown this link between English skills and, higher incomes, especially for younger people in developing economies.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it opens up those international job markets that might have been out of reach before. So this initiative is really about giving Egyptian students the tools to not only handle global challenges, but actually be a part of finding solutions.
I see.
And ultimately becoming what they call in the article, world citizens.
World citizens. I like that. Sounds very, globally minded,
Yeah.
responsible.
Right.
So for our listeners who are into, let's say, global trends, international development, or even just the future of education, this is something they should definitely be following. Yeah.
Much bigger than just, oh, they're learning English now.
Exactly. And what's particularly cool is how it lines up with Egypt's own Education Reform 2.0 strategy,
Mm-hmm.
which is, really big on those 21st century skills.
Right.
Critical thinking, collaboration, communication,
Mhm.
creativity.
Yeah, those buzzwords, right?
Exactly. Those are the skills everyone's looking for these days.
Well, they always talk about those buzzwords, digital innovation, gender inclusion, green education.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always curious what that actually looks like in a real curriculum.
Okay.
Any concrete examples?
So let's take digital innovation in an English curriculum.
Okay.
This could be things like incorporating coding projects,
Oh,
online debates, maybe even digital storytelling to boost those communication skills.
I see.
For gender inclusion, it might mean analyzing literature from different perspectives,
Okay.
encouraging girls to be leaders in discussions, and making sure the teaching materials themselves don't have any, gender stereotypes.
Right. And then green education could involve using English to learn about environmental issues,
Okay.
researching solutions,
Yeah.
maybe even collaborating with students from other countries on environmental projects.
So it's like really weaving these ideas into how they're learning the language, not just like, okay, here's a separate module on this.
Exactly, yeah.
There's a quote in the article from the British Council Egypt director, Mark Howard, and he says, "Better English skills for young people helps to empower them to access opportunities and build international connections." Sounds like that's the core idea here.
Definitely. And that really hits home for me, just personally. Think about it in your own life. All the doors that would open if you could talk to people from all over the world.
Hmm.
Access info from like a global pool of knowledge.
Yeah.
And work on projects that go beyond borders. That's the power of language in action.
So how are they splitting up the work in this partnership? Who's doing what?
So the British Council, with their 90 years of experience in Egypt, they're leading the technical side, like developing the actual curriculum framework and training those Ministry of Education people who will be putting it into practice. They're the English teaching experts, so that makes sense.
Right.
And then UNICEF, they're bringing their expertise in making things inclusive and getting everyone on board. They want to make sure the curriculum works for all students, even those from, disadvantaged backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
They're also getting feedback from teachers, parents, communities to make sure the curriculum is accepted and actually works well when it's rolled out.
Sounds like a pretty well-organized approach,
Yeah.
combining what each organization does best.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the Egyptian Ministry of Education is totally on board with this,
Yeah,
seeing it as part of their bigger sustainable development goals.
absolutely. That's really important. This isn't some random project. It's very much in line with Egypt's national priorities. They understand that a more educated, skilled workforce is essential for economic growth and social progress.
And it's not just the government. Even universities are getting on board.
Mm.
Didn't Exeter University just announce a new campus in Cairo?
They did. It's like everyone's realizing the potential of Egypt's young people. They're the ones who will shape the future, not only for Egypt, but for the region and the world, really.
Yeah, which brings us to something the article mentioned, the British Council's financial struggles lately and how that might threaten their global work. Makes me wonder about the long-term sustainability of this initiative.
That's definitely something to watch. These big educational projects can be vulnerable to budget cuts. It's super important to keep the momentum going. But as of now, the work in Egypt is moving ahead as planned.
That's good to hear. So we've covered quite a bit. We've established this is a huge undertaking. Yeah. Revamping Egypt's secondary school English curriculum to, in the end, give millions of young people the skills to thrive in a world that's more and more interconnected.
Yeah, it's not just about memorizing English grammar. It's about weaving in those crucial 21st century skills, fostering a sense of global citizenship, and lining up with Egypt's own national development goals. It's got many layers, this initiative, and the potential for a really significant impact.
Absolutely. And we're not finished yet. In part 2, we'll explore the wider implications of this whole thing. How can better English skills actually open doors for young people in developing countries? What does it mean for economies? And how can it help tackle those global challenges?
Yeah.
Stay with us. It's all connected in ways you might not expect.
So we're back, and before the break, we were talking about the potential this new English curriculum has in Egypt.
Yeah, and I want to dig into how this could change the lives of those 23 million students. Like, what kind of opportunities might open up for them because of this that they wouldn't have had before?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Having better English skills, especially for these young people in developing countries like Egypt, can be a real game changer. Think about higher education, for example. A lot of the top universities worldwide, including those with big online programs, they mainly teach in English.
So you're saying a student, let's say, in some rural Egyptian village who might not have had the chance or resources before, could potentially get a world-class education? That's kind of mind-blowing.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just formal education, too. English opens up this whole world of online resources.
Oh, right.
From professional courses to research databases to, those global networking platforms, they can tap into a way bigger pool of information and expertise than they ever could before.
It's like they suddenly have access to this massive network of knowledge and opportunities around the world.
Exactly, and that spreads out, impacting the whole economy. A workforce with more skills and education, especially if they're fluent in English, that can attract foreign investment, encourage new businesses and ideas, and ultimately boost a country's development and how well it competes globally.
It's amazing how something as, seemingly basic as improving English skills can create this chain reaction of positive change, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole. It really shows you how powerful education can be.
It really does. And we can't forget the social impact either. Learning another language, especially one as widely spoken as English, can build empathy and understanding between cultures.
That's interesting.
Helps people connect more deeply, break down stereotypes, and even play a role in resolving conflicts by, making it easier for different groups to talk and understand each other.
You brought up some really important points. It's not just about economic opportunities. It's about creating a world that's more connected and peaceful.
Right. Precisely. However, we have to acknowledge that not everyone sees these types of initiatives as completely positive. There are legitimate concerns and criticisms that we need to look at.
You're right. It's crucial to consider all sides. So what are some of the potential problems or downsides that we should be aware of?
One worry people have is that this could lead to cultures becoming too similar. Some critics argue that promoting English so much, especially on a large scale, can erode local languages and cultural identities.
I see.
They're afraid that English will become so dominant that it overshadows or even replaces traditional languages and customs, resulting in less diversity and a more homogeneous global culture.
That's a valid concern. It's about finding that balance, isn't it? Giving young people the tools to communicate and participate globally, but without sacrificing their own cultural heritage. Are there any examples of how this has played out in other situations, either good or bad?
Oh, for sure. There are definitely instances where languages and cultures have been pushed aside because of globalization and the dominance of certain languages. But there are also success stories, bilingual or even multilingual education programs that have managed to promote language learning while still preserving and celebrating local languages and cultures. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's about finding ways to integrate English learning so that it complements and adds to existing cultural identities, not undermines them.
So careful planning and execution are really key here.
Mm.
It's not enough to just introduce English classes without thinking about the wider cultural context and the potential impact.
Exactly. And beyond the cultural stuff, there are also practical challenges. Training teachers to effectively teach a new curriculum,
Yeah.
developing high-quality learning materials that are culturally relevant,
Mm,
and ensuring everyone has equal access to education across different communities. These are all huge tasks,
right.
and these are often even harder in developing countries where resources are already limited.
Right. Having a great curriculum on paper is one thing, but actually putting it into practice effectively on such a large scale, making sure it reaches every student, that's a whole other challenge.
Absolutely. And we also need to recognize that just offering English lessons won't magically fix all the problems in a country's education system.
I see, yeah.
Often there are deep-rooted inequalities that need to be addressed too. Things like differences in access to quality education based on things like socioeconomic status, gender, or where someone lives. Initiatives like this need to be part of a bigger effort to change the education system that tackles these big systemic issues head on.
It's complicated. There's no simple solution. But even with all these complexities and potential challenges, it's hard to argue against the benefits of giving young people the ability to communicate, connect, and participate on a global stage. English, despite its history and complexities, is kind of like the common language of our interconnected world, wouldn't you say?
I agree with you, and that's precisely why these conversations are so important. We need to look at both the potential good and the potential risks, and make sure that initiatives like this are implemented thoughtfully, sustainably, and with a deep understanding of the specific place and people involved.
We need to ask the hard questions, get different perspectives, and work towards a future where education truly empowers individuals, strengthens communities, and contributes to a world that's fairer and more equitable.
Well said. So, we've talked about the big picture, the macro level implications, but I'm wondering about the more personal individual level. What about the experiences of the students and teachers on the ground? What's happening in the classrooms?
Yeah, that would be fascinating to get a glimpse into those classrooms.
Right.
What are their challenges? What are their successes? What are they hoping for?
It's where things get really interesting, but unfortunately, the article we're looking at from the PII News doesn't really go into those personal stories. It focuses more on the high-level details of the partnership itself.
Oh, that's a shame. I always find those personal accounts to be the most engaging and insightful. I guess that's where our own curiosity comes in, this deep dive. It's just the beginning. It's
Mhm.
sparked all these new questions for me, and I'm sure for our listeners too. Maybe it's a nudge to explore further, to seek out those voices and stories that we don't always hear in the news headlines.
Absolutely. We encourage you to keep digging, to ask those questions, to find those firsthand accounts, and to form your own opinions about these complex global education initiatives. There's always more to learn, more to understand, and more to talk about.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about for sure. We began with a news story about a new English curriculum in Egypt, and we've ended up discussing international relations, economic development, the power of language, the challenges of globalization. It's been quite a journey.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of everything, doesn't it? But hold on, we're not finished just yet. In our last segment, we're going to zoom out even more and look at how this partnership affects the relationship between the UK and Egypt. How does this educational collaboration fit into the overall political and economic landscape? What does it tell us about the UK's changing role in the region?
Those are great questions. We'll be tackling those and more when we come back for part 3. Stay tuned. All right, we're back for our final part. We've talked about this ambitious partnership to change Egypt's English curriculum. Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the relationship between the UK and Egypt.
Right, it's important to remember this initiative isn't just about education. It reflects the evolving dynamics between these two countries.
So how does this partnership fit into that broader geopolitical context?
Historically, the UK has played a significant role in shaping Egypt's education system. Remember, we said earlier, the British Council has been working in Egypt for almost a century. Their influence is still felt today. But the nature of that relationship has shifted over the years.
The article mentioned the British Council's 90-year history in Egypt. How have things changed exactly? What does this partnership tell us about their current relationship?
Well, there's a much stronger emphasis on collaboration and mutual benefit now. Both the UK and Egypt recognize the huge potential of Egypt's young population and the importance of giving them the skills to succeed in a globalized world. This partnership really shows that shared understanding.
So it's not a top-down approach anymore, where one country dictates the terms. It's more of a collaborative model where both countries work together toward a common goal.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. And it's a strategy that benefits both sides. It helps Egypt with its development goals, and it lets the UK strengthen its ties with a crucial partner in the region.
It's like that concept of soft power we discussed earlier. It's not about forcing or controlling, but building relationships and goodwill through initiatives like this.
Exactly. To clarify, soft power is the ability to influence others not by force, but by being attractive and persuasive. It involves promoting your culture, values, and policies to build relationships and achieve your foreign policy objectives. And things like education and cultural exchange are key tools for that.
So in a way, this partnership is a win-win. It strengthens their bond, promotes common interests, and could even benefit them both economically.
Yes, and it creates new opportunities for UK universities and businesses. We talked about Exeter University's new campus in Cairo. That's a perfect example of how this initiative can directly benefit the UK. And I bet other institutions and companies are looking at Egypt with renewed interest.
It's like a ripple effect spreading outward from this educational initiative. But it makes you wonder, if these partnerships are so beneficial for both countries, why don't we see more of them happening around the world?
That's a great question. It's probably a mix of things. Funding is always a challenge. But there are also political factors, bureaucracy, and the need to tailor these initiatives to each specific country and region.
It's never as simple as just saying, let's do this everywhere. It takes careful planning, collaboration, and a deep understanding of the local context.
You're absolutely right. But I believe there's huge potential for these collaborations to make a real difference globally. I hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about regarding the power of education as a tool for diplomacy, development, and understanding between cultures.
It definitely has for me. We started with a news story about an English curriculum in Egypt, and we've ended up talking about international relations, economic development, the power of language, the challenges of globalization. It's been quite a journey.
It really shows how important it is to be curious, to look beneath the surface, and to understand that even small initiatives can have a huge impact.
So as we wrap up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to think about?
I'd say never underestimate the power of education to change lives and shape the future. Whether it's learning a new language, building critical thinking skills, or fostering cross-cultural understanding, education is the key to unlocking human potential and creating a more just and fair world.
That's a great point. And if this conversation has sparked your interest in global education, the UK's role in international development, or Egypt's path towards a brighter future, we encourage you to keep exploring. We'll share some additional resources in the show notes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.